Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Tech Commute. I'm very excited to finally have you on the Tech Commute. Principal Cloud Advocate, is that your title? Principal
That
Cloud
is
Advocate
my
slash
title.
AI at
Yeah.
Microsoft. I need to know what all that means because I feel like that is a very fancy title. But why don't you introduce yourself, ladies and gentlemen? April Gittens.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is April Gittens. I have been working in developer relations now since 2013, I want to say.
Okay.
And I am a principal cloud advocate at Microsoft. And so some folks may be familiar with the roles of developer advocates. And so in my case, yes, I am a developer advocate, but also with the focus on the cloud as well. And so, especially since our team at Microsoft, which is the company that I'm part of, not all advocates are developer advocates, but we're all cloud advocates at least. And so
Oh,
it helps to broaden the title a little more.
wow. Well, it is so great to have you here. You popped onto my radar because your content is just fantastic. You seem to be a tinkerer too. Has that been something that has always been part of your kind of career or hobbies or life?
I would say crafting is really
Okay.
what was the strongest growing up, even now. It wasn't until this year that I actually started getting into electronics, to be honest with
Hmm.
you. And so a lot of that has come from where I see my own career heading and doing whatever I can now to gain the knowledge that I need to one day hopefully make that transition into robotics, which is the area that I would really love to get into. So a
Oh.
lot of what you're seeing online these days is me literally starting from the ground up, learning a new area that I didn't really have any solid knowledge in. But where I'm fortunate is that I've spent years as a programmer, so I have the programming part down. But
Yeah.
now there's that whole electrical engineering side of it that I didn't have. So I'm
Oh,
now
dear.
picking that up at
Yeah,
least.
tinkering in public, the new hashtag. Well, let's rewind a little bit. So you said you got into tech around 2013 ish.
Yes.
What were you doing prior to that? Is this straight out of school? You got your first role, or maybe give us a little background there.
Yeah, I actually
April's
started
origin story.
I started out in luxury fashion actually, and I
Oh,
was a menswear stylist and a visual merchandiser, and it was a really great career path for where I was at the time. I was still in undergrad, and I will definitely say you don't realize just how much adult life costs until you're out in the real world paying
amen to
adult life
that.
bills. And I realized one day I could have stayed on that path in fashion. I wanted to be a buyer. Like for those who don't know what a buyer is, they're the ones that are more or less responsible for what items you actually see in your favorite stores, especially if
Oh,
it's something like a Neiman Marcus, which is one of the places I work. There's multiple buyers that are responsible for going to the different fashion shows or going to the different showrooms, and they're deciding, okay, this location is going to get these particular styles at this much quantity and these sizes, whereas this other location will get this, that, and the third. So that's the career I had wanted, but I actually had to talk with someone to realistically get an idea of what that career looked like in execution. And it was one of those situations where I'm just like bright eyed, like, oh, it's going to be the coolest career ever. And the guy I was speaking with, he had been doing it for years. And he's just like, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. And I think a lot of us can say that about a lot of our jobs. Like in the
yeah.
beginning, it sounds great. You go to all the events, you wine and dine people. But after a while, it starts to get a little old. And it was slightly discouraging, but also it was something I needed to hear. And also he gave me the reality of the pay. And so that makes a big difference for me at that time for sure. So I said, okay, I need to get into something that's going to definitely help me get where I wanted to be financially a bit sooner. And that's where tech came in. I ended up getting an internship with the Consumer Technology Association. There's the ones that
Hmm.
do CES every year in Vegas. And I was in the IT department there. And that's really what kicked off my journey into being in tech.
And that was it right there. Well, what sort of parallels do you see, kind of maybe transferable skills that you had coming from like the fashion background that you've
Mhm.
incorporated into what you're doing here? I mean, obviously, we all notice the creative flourish in your content, that
Yeah.
polish and attention to detail, but what else?
We tend to say when we're in school, like, where are we going to use this skill ever in the
Yeah.
real world? Like, when am I using this advanced math? When am I using this like random formula? But for me, it wasn't until graduate school, actually, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design. And
Hmm.
so my courses were like required that you understand how to use Adobe Creative Suite, for example.
Awesome.
So I got to use a lot of what I
Yeah.
did in school now today. It's really helped me understand how to run and operate a business, for example. And even though I am working for a company, it gives me that understanding of these are all the pieces that come together to make this company work. And in doing that, it also helps me from a content perspective because I got to learn, like I mentioned, all the creative tools and how to use those. I got to learn more about branding from that as well. And a lot of, I know there was mentioned earlier, someone in the chat about my branding. A lot of that has come from what I learned in school, believe it or not. So I will say going to SCAD defied the whole, you're not going to use what you learn in school in the real world. But I feel like I use my graduate degree every day
Yeah.
in way, shape, or form. But that definitely has made a big difference. Even just working in fashion and working with different customer personalities on a
Mm.
day-to-day basis. Similar thing in the role that I'm in. It's a very public-facing role, so you
Yeah.
definitely get to engage with various walks of life, and you have to really understand and know how to meet people where they are, how to converse with people properly as well. And just from being in a customer service position for years, being able to make sure that either our customers or the developers who are interested in learning how to use our products and services at Microsoft, that they have an idea of what we have to offer, how to use it as well. And the last thing I'll add to that, specifically working in the fashion space, we were very much responsible for what is called product knowledge. And that's
Oh,
being able to tell you pretty much almost everything about the items that we have in the store, like its origin, the materials it's used, the process the designers follow. Keep in mind, I worked in luxury fashion. So that's like you're expecting a certain experience when
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
shopping in those stores. But being able to fully grasp a lot of product knowledge in my head has definitely transferred to now because being in AI, I mean, if I tell you I work in AI, realistically, Jason, like, what does that mean? There's like so
Yeah.
much AI,
Yeah.
right?
It's very open.
Exactly. But from a Microsoft perspective, for the products that I'm familiar with, I can pretty much tell you more or less like who's it for, what are the features, what are the constraints, whether one thing is better for you or another. So even though now my role is very much more technical compared to when I worked in the fashion space, a lot of the skills that I grew when I worked in that area has continued to show up now that I'm working in tech.
I love that. So it seems like kind of touching on the product knowledge aspects, like details are important. Was that attention to detail something you've always kind of had as a trait in your life, or was that something you sort of just gained through experience?
I've always had it. I'm a details person.
Hmm.
I like to notice the tiny things that may just be overlooked, that people might not think about, because the tiny things is what makes up the whole. And you just
Yeah.
never know who's going to notice that one small thing versus everything else that's bigger. So for me, it's always been a details matter. And I feel like just over time that had just continued to have grown coming from fashion now coming into tech. And I think that's super helpful when we look at the end user experience as well
Hmm.
and making sure that as best as we can, no detail goes missed. Even from a content creation perspective, doing the best that I can within my ability to make sure no detail goes missed.
How do you balance that? Or are you using any tools? Or I know for you, you're a lister.
Yes, and I was going to tell you, I've updated my workflows from when you and I spoke some time ago about how I am tracking everything. So, believe it or not, after years of denial, I finally gave my life to Notion. I was very anti Notion for years, but the reason why I came over into Notion was one out of curiosity. Even if I try something at one point, I'm like, I don't think I like it. I'll at least try again just to see because things evolve over time.
Yeah.
And I ended up watching some YouTube video, maybe like 2 or 3 videos of someone showing how to do custom Notion setups. And I was at a point where I really wanted to do a better job at tracking growth. And so I will say it also helps me identify how much time I have because
Yeah.
I'm a details person. It's very challenging for me to just turn the camera on for like 2 minutes, record, and then I'm done. Like there's takes that need to
Yeah.
happen, and maybe I didn't like the way I said it one way versus the other instead. And it gives me an idea of how long I'm taking doing content too. I've gotten to a point now where I know how long something can take, and if someone were to say like, "Hey, we need a 1 minute video of you talking about like Visual Studio Code, for example." Well, I know how long it'll take for me to come up with that, but I didn't have that insight until I converted to something that was a bit
Yeah.
more thorough and robust of how I was managing my content.
Mhm.
So I would say tracking everything through there has been great.
How do you kind of battle that inner comparison of seeing other people's content and then having that sort of perfectionist mindset? Like, how do you know what you're doing is enough for you? Like, when did you get to that point?
I got to that point when whatever point in time I would have reached a level of burnout from trying to listen to
Mm.
all the advice around making sure your content has this and that and it follows this trend and that trend. Because at some point you just get tired.
Mm.
And reality hits when one day you're just sitting on, let's take Instagram, for example, when you're scrolling, and then the most like mindless, unedited video has like a million
Yeah.
likes, and you're like, you know what?
Yeah. I feel
So,
that.
it's very, very easy to burn out if you're not careful. And at some point in the past, I know I've hit that point where I'm just like, this is way too much. And, you know, and you probably experienced this as well, Jason. The
Hmm.
one piece of content that you didn't put a lot of effort into, that's the one that goes viral. It's always the one that goes
Yep.
viral. It's the wildest thing.
Interesting. What would make you frustrated and overwhelmed about that? Like how would that go if you were in that scenario where it sounds like you'd ideally be super productive, but how could that be detrimental?
I will tell you this. About 3 years ago, I
Hmm.
purposely stepped away from doing tech events, saying no to a lot of even like virtual things as well, because I personally wanted to just spend time with my fiance at the time, now
Yeah.
husband, and our dog. That's all I wanted to do. And I realized the biggest blocker from that was always being on, always working on content around the
Ooh.
clock. So for me, that is where I place a lot more value. And I knew at the time that I would be getting married soon. And now we're married. And I'm glad I did that. It gave me the opportunity to figure out the best way to balance my personal life and my work life.
It seems like, based on what you've told me, your fiance, now husband, understands your job and you guys
Yeah.
communicate. Like, how important has it been to have a partner that, like, works with you in this kind of a lifestyle?
So he's very supportive. I would say 9 times out of 10, whatever I post on LinkedIn, he's like one of the first to always like it. And anytime I do have something going on that he happens to have a link to, he'll share it with his friends and our family as well. And so definitely beyond supportive. And then usually when I am done with editing something that I'm like super duper proud of, like I'll sit and
Hmm.
I'll ask if you can watch it. Sometimes I put it on the big screen on the TV, like it's like a
Ooh,
movie.
yeah.
He's overall very supportive, very understanding of it.
How do you decide, or like what influences your content and your style? We're transitioning. I know that was
Yeah.
such a segue, but I want to,
No, that was a beautiful segue. That's fine.
yeah,
So for me, it has to feel like me.
yeah,
And usually, if I work with an internal team and that they have scripts, if it just doesn't sound like something I would say, I'm not going to say it. It'll sound like it's not me.
yeah,
And so, if and when I have those chances to like modify something to be more like I would speak, then that's like always like super helpful. If it's content that I'm doing on my own, it needs to be able to be reflective in how I would deliver something, even just aesthetically as
yeah.
well, from like what's my background that I'm in, what am I wearing as well, because all those things make me me. And so just knowing what the goal is and identifying those weaker areas that might be causing you not to really get engagement. I think
Sure.
that's what's helped me a lot with figuring out how to focus the content that I'm doing.
Nice. And how have you seen your content evolve? Like, what were those first couple videos like, and what were some things that you know, changed? I mean, I know
Yeah.
we all have them.
Yeah, my first videos was actually faceless, and the only reason I stopped doing those videos was because I started getting comments. They were saying, you need to be on camera because at that time, there's not a lot of Black women doing technical
Mm,
content on YouTube. And so, therefore, you need to be on camera because you're helping with the representation. And I couldn't argue with that, Jason. I
no,
mean,
what do you
they
say?
the facts are there. There at
Yeah.
that time,
Yeah.
there was not that many of us. Now I'm so happy that there's
Sure.
so many other Black women that's doing technical content. And so these days, I make it a point as much as I can to always be on camera. I think it's worth it at the end of the day. So that's why I always like encouraging people who want to create content, like, go do it. There's for the most part, the only thing that's really going to stop you is yourself. And so if you have the drive to go try it out and to go create something, why not do it? You might have to like build up a really tough backbone because of the internet, but
Yeah.
that comes with the territory. Not everybody's
Yeah.
going to like everything that you do, but if we lived our whole life afraid of what other people are going to think, like where we have gotten.
It's
Yeah.
definitely true. So, from all of the cuts, we're kind of coming up on time here, which sucks because I feel like I have 100 other questions. But I want to know, like, what some of the biggest lessons you've learned about yourself creating this content have been.
I would say for me personally, I've learned that I really need to get a good grip on when good is good enough.
Mm,
Because I'm such a detailed person, and I mentioned early on, I could edit forever and ever
yeah.
and
Oh,
ever
yeah.
and
Yeah.
ever, you know? And by the time I publish, it's like no one cares about what I had to say
Yeah.
anymore, you know? But getting to a point where I knew my boundary of what is good enough, and I think you may hear other people mention this in different advice around content, but I think it's like that 80 to 90%. Like once you get there, that's good
Yeah.
enough. Like go ahead and publish and do what you need to do. So I think for me, defining my own 80% good enough was something that I had to come to terms with. The other thing too, I've come to learn that starting over is not the end of the world.
Mm,
As well, because when I was on Twitter, I think by the time I finally deleted my account, I was at maybe about 25,000 followers on there. And Jason, that's when I had to think to myself, but why does that matter? That I have that
ooh.
large of a following again in
Yeah.
life. What is that even proving? What
Yeah.
is that doing? Is it really just boosting my ego? Because if
Yeah.
that's the case, then I'm doing this for all the wrong reasons. And so for me, I had to come to a point where I had to learn what was my actual why for growing on social media. And I've come to define that as being able to help and educate people. And so whether it's 25,000 followers, whether it's 5,000 followers, whether it's only like 900 followers, are people following up with me to say they learned something? Have I made an impact in someone's life based on the feedback they've given
I
me?
love that.
And so if I'm able to get that from people, that is how I've started defining success. And if it all boils down to because it feels nice to have X amount of people, then I think you're doing it for the wrong reason. But if you're there to like
Totally.
help, at least for me, I was there to help. And that changed my whole view on growth and how I create and why I create content.
Well, thank you so much again for your time. I hope everyone had a great time. Thank you again to April, and thanks to all the people in attendance. Enjoy the rest
Yes.
of your days. Bye, everybody.